joining offline and also online. Uh, oh, I need to be on stage. Yeah. Okay. Yes. A very good morning. I hope you all are in a good health, good shape. Thank you for joining, for coming to this research talk. That now we are so privileged to have Professor Toshi Sasao. Professor Toshi Sasao is from the International Christian University in Tokyo, Japan, who is right now is also a young professor with us at the Faculty of Psychology Universitas Indonesia or the University of Indonesia. Um, this is something that we'll look forward to listening to your presentation, Toshi, because today Toshi is going to share with us to present some of his research in Japan, which I believe that whether it is in Japan, Indonesia, or wherever, we could learn something or many things out of your studies and also your research in Japan, Toshi. So we are thankful for you to visit us, and actually not just to visit us, but to provide some lectures before this today's research talk. So without further ado, I would like to give this time and space for you, Toshi, please.
Okay. Good morning, and welcome to the lecture. This is my last lecture here at the University of Indonesia. I'm very excited about it. Okay. There's just a very nice equipment here. There's a camera who just kind of follows me from this side to the other side, and I can control everything from here. Okay. But anyway, in the interest of time, I try to finish within 1 hour. And if you have any questions from online, please do so. Okay. The topic, the title of this talk is Infusing Social Justice Back into Social Psychology Research in Asia Toward a Transformative Paradigm Shift. Okay. So I'm about to see if it'll work. Oh, okay. Before we go on, let me just tell you what you're going to expect from here in the next hour. I'll be introducing myself a little bit, where I'm coming from, and then we'll look at review of some social psychological research in early days and how that type of research filled our need for social justice. So I'm talking about that a little bit. And then when you apply social psychology from that perspective, we have some issues. We have some problems, methodological, conceptually. So I'm going to talk about 3 major methodological and conceptual issues. And then we're getting back to kind of the study that I've done several years ago with the Korean minorities in Japan. And then we'll look at some of the research agenda and the conclusions. We're getting back to where we are in terms of psychological research. Where's here? Oh, there. Here's the little introduction that I have. I was born and raised in Hokkaido, the northernmost island, the big one, close to Russia. And then I had a lot of interest in languages, communication, law, literature. But in 1974, I had a chance to visit South Korea for the first time by boat from the southern part of Japan. And that kind of changed my life. After I came back, I told my parents that I'm not going to stay in Japan. I am going to leave. I'm going to leave Japan to study somewhere else. So 1975, I landed in Seattle, Washington, up the Pacific Northwest. And And then my academic career and my personal life and everything started there back in 1975. I pretty much focused on social psychology all those years. I was lucky to have many of the ancient social psychologists under my belt. I was able to work with Don Campbell's students, Norman Mitter. So we're heavily into experimental social psych, and J.P. Guilford's psychometrics laboratory at USC. And of course, under all these is the Kurt Levine's action research tradition. Oh. Like I said, I was trained as a social psychologist, but somehow along my career, I sort of redefined myself, not intentionally, but as a natural progression of my career, I became a community psychologist. And I tell you why I get into community psychology with a more social justice perspective. And I've been teaching in Japan and mostly in the US, mostly in Japan, and then Korea and Poland in between. I usually don't get stuck in one place, but whenever I teach, then I go travel and then teach kind of things. So my question has been always, how can I participate as a psychologist in efforts to promote peace, justice, and well-being, diversifying society? That was a kind of major research theme that I had. And this is one event that happened to me 1991. There was a big Los Angeles riots where we experienced the racial ethnic conflicts in town. It was a nightmare. I still remember 91 when I was going back home about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It took me about 3 hours to get home, usually about 30 minutes. The reason was that the whole town was on fire. And there was a beatings and there were killings and all that kind of unrest or civil war almost in the situations. I'd never seen that in myself. So it was quite an experience for me. And this is one of the first articles that I've written with the graduate student back then to look at the impact of the riots on the Korean American community. So just in case if you have to leave early, I give you the conclusions, take-home messages for my talk. One is that the Asia is more diverse and heterogeneous than mere categories represented by nation states, ethnic categories, religions, genders, or languages. Social justice must be integrated back into social psychological research to understand and intervene with minority communities. And social justice, must be conceptualized in a social ecological framework. And the fourth is social psychology was founded on the development of regularities, rules, but also the promotion of social justice even in early days. And social psychology research in Asia outside of the US has been beset by the conceptual methodological issues. Sorry, I got a cold about 11 years ago. Not 11 years, 11 days ago here in Coupon. So over it. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the life resources model that was proposed to account for the well-being of minority individuals and communities from a social justice perspective. So putting social justice back into social psychology research, do a little bit review. The early social psychologists that I know pretty well from a textbook or from my readings and talking to our professors, early pioneers sought to reveal the pathology of injustice. Look at the classic studies of Adorno's authoritarian personality, Allport's stuff on prejudice, Milgram's obedience research, Darley and Latané's bystander effect, and of course the Kurt Lewin he had only 50 years of his life, or close to 60, but he died prematurely in the United States. He argues that we contribute not only to knowledge, but also to ameliorate social problems and social relations in our society. And we saw John Doddard in 1937 and Murray Yahoda 1933 in England demonstrated the devastating effects of economic stress and injustice. And of course, Kenneth and Mamie Clark was highly influential in influencing the racial policies in the United States. Now, more than half a century later, in social psychology, we had this kind of renewed interest in social justice, mainly because of the scandals involved in the US presidential election and also the COVID-19 situations. So the question that we need to really get back to at this point is how are we to achieve the renewed mission of social psychology? The original mission was to understand and look at the dynamics of social behaviors, but also the second part is to how to achieve social justice through our research. For example, we ask, are abstractions of scientific laws more important than understanding lived experiences under various social and cultural contexts? Second is it more important to study people rather than variables in our research? Are we to abandon experimentation, quantification, or measurement in our empirical research efforts? And the third is a new era. Those of us in Asia have not felt the urgency that when we look at the problem of Americanized social psychology and relying on weird, westernized, educated, industrialized, rich democratic populations. 1969, in one of the old textbooks on social psychology, Bruce Smith talked about social psychology and extensively concerned with human values, such as social justice, because it must grapple with human experience in society. And second, he also warned of the dangers of social psychology that is artificially divorced from human values and called for the development of science of social man and women that begins to do justice for his or her humanities, a science of men and women that is for men and women. Now, what is social justice anyway? We seem to understand what it is, but in social areas, or community psychology areas, the Bell looked at it, social justice is to achieve full and equal participation of all groups in our society. And we also have a vision of society where all of us will receive or have access to the resources. And Rawls, a political philosopher, talked about two kinds of justices. One is distributive. How are we going to distribute the resources? And the other is more procedural justice. How we're going to. And from the Carroll and the Weinberg in 2002, they argue that we need to include the voice of all stakeholders in decision making. That's more of the procedural justice. So there are many types of justices, but the social justice we understand it here refers to power, history, and social identity in an entire society, either majority or minority. For example, let's take an example why social justice is important for social psychological research. Let's take a look at the very typical example of problems with the academic achievement or well-being for certain groups in our society. How are we to understand or intervene for certain groups depends on type of social justice perspectives that we take in research and practice. How we view minority individuals and groups, that affects how we understand and intervene. For example, if you're going to be focusing on distributive justice, we want to know the impact of or lack of resources and opportunities on poor achievement or lower well-being. That's basically stigmatizing the group. That's the kind of traditional focus of research and practice. In my early career, I worked with the Pacific Asian communities in California. And one time I was called into a small community in Los Angeles, just pretty much full of Pacific Islanders, Samoans. And they argued that even the people in the community said that they need help. They need resources to get over their alcoholism. So what we did was to develop a health promotion program in the Samoan communities, but that's really stigmatizing the group. I learned later from the community leaders, don't look at us like that. We're doing fine. We just don't do exercises that much. So the way that we looked at it traditionally, the problem in the community, the minority community, is to kind of stigmatize the group. The other part is a culture of justice, is to recognize the strength of ethnic minorities and celebrate them. But again, it's ignoring minorities, expecting very little. And that's injustice of merit and strength. Okay. So I want us to kind of shift our perspective, change our perspectives to more of an ecological mindset and looking at the social justice issues. And I wanted to introduce to you one of the developmental psychologists' framework, Bronfenbrenner's model, ecological framework. And he argues that he posited that he conceptualized the immediate and distal domains of influences in individual growth and welfare as a nested series of structures. You probably heard about these 5 levels of human development, but the last one is kind of interesting, chrono. It refers to individual development as well as the historical movement. The society moves around. If we're going to focus on the individuals, that's fine. We look at the developmental aspect, but also our society is changing. There's more flow of movement among us. Right? So that's kind of micro, meso, exo, macro, and chrono is something that we haven't looked at it very carefully. Okay? So this is a typical model that is used in explaining the Bronfenbrenner's model. But one of the misunderstandings that people have, I don't know how many of you are in the audience or clinicians working directly with the clients, but when I talk about this model, it says, yeah, we focus on families, we focus on schools, we focus on the community, we focus on our neighborhood. But the point of his model is not just at the one level at a time, but the Bronfenbrenner's model talks about the interaction between different systems, different levels. So how you as an individual relates to your family, how your family relates to schools, neighborhoods, how your family is viewed in a community. So being a minority, you always think about, how the people in a neighborhood think of us as a family. How they think about our kids. So it's a systemic, dynamic, transactional perspective with diverse conceptions of a particular context in schools and families, but not at the individual level, individual systems level, but it's the interaction between the systems, right? So that kind of fits in with the community psychology idea of person-environment fit, right? So the school is not only a physical site for academic learning per se, but the social, emotional learning environment and transaction with people, other settings and resources in the context of social norms for social justice. And so how are we going to look at the social justice in Asia? I want to talk about like 3 major issues that we still have to think about. Why have we gotten stuck here, spinning our wheels in social psychology research? One is the overindulged in individualism, collective dichotomy. Second one is the romanticizing group differences. third is we're kind of disguised by indigenous psychology. So let's go take a look at it real quick. You and I, and from the various places in social psychology, clinical psychology, cultural psychology, anywhere, we heard about individualism, collectivism concept. And we often call it East-West binary. Asians are more collectivistic, non-Asians are more individualistic. But the more recent research, not recent, probably about 10, 15, we started to see that it's really not the case. We can't demarcate the people into East versus West. So we got stuck with the idea of individualism, collectivism, and the two problems with that is one problem is that we're all inclusive Asians. But there's so many of the unique characteristics associated with the different countries, nation states, and even within a country. We kind of use the stereotypical kind of idea. When I see someone for the first time and say, "Oh yeah, I know your culture. I know you're collective. You come from the collectivistic cultures, and we're not." So okay, but I'm not as collectivistic as you might think. So it's really not where you're from, but more how you grew up, and more that takes on the contextual factors. The other part of the problem with this East-West binary is that most of the studies been done in 90s, 2000, and early 2000 is based on the students in the United States, in the US colleges. And they usually collect data from different samples. But think about those Asians, think about those Caucasians, think about all those African students. Those students are usually from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea. They're really not from Asia, but they grew up and their parents are pretty well off, highly professional, skilled workers, and their kids. And the kids grew up in the US, and they are the one who contributed to this idea of collectivistic versus individualistic kind of dichotomy, but which doesn't really apply us here as it's just too, it's convenient. So that's what we call the convenient samples that you get from the subject pool in the US psychology department. Romanticizing group differences. Now, whenever you do MA thesis, BA thesis, doctorate, as a student, we're so happy that if you see some statistically significant differences between groups. And if you don't see anything among the different Asian groups, then say, oh, it's too bad. But we're probably the same Asian groups. We're not. So Hermans and Kempen, 1998, the American psychologist, talk about the cultural differences cast in terms of dichotomies are not necessarily reflective of theoretical challenges by the globalization perspective. That's more than 20 years ago, and it's still going on. So we just can't look at the person. We can't just look at the passport, anything, and say, you're from Germany, you're such and such. You're from Greece, you're such and such. It's really where you spend most of your time, what's your contextual kind of factors. So if we keep doing that, we're looking at we experience the social injustice ideas still infiltrating our research project. So issues of injustice lingered in social psych research. And when we find group differences, they are usually, the effect sizes are pretty small. So what should we do in this case? Maybe we look at the intersectionality issues where you look at the effect of gender and ethnicity. And when gender is not affected in what context, in what groups. So it'd be more of the qualitative analysis in addition to the quantitative. Or we can use a CUPS, culture, person, and situation by Kwok-Leon and Cohen's, where they look at the cultural and the individual differences, the not treating the other as a noise or without reducing one to the other. So it's always an interaction among the variables. There's a recent interesting study. It was published in the Asian Journal of Social Psych by P1 in all 2020 that they apply social identity model of collective action, and that kind of gives us the interesting insights on the interreligious violence and conflict. So I was looking at all these issues, and perhaps we need to develop a conceptual. Oh, it doesn't move. So I started to focus more on the variable that intervene is a social connectedness in families, schools, workplaces, and communities that would influences our sense of well-being. But of course, that is there's a background to this. It's contextual factors and individual factors kind of contribute to a sense of social connectedness. It's not simply the interpersonal issues, but it's more could be considered as a social capital idea. So includes all that. Going to look at the examples of this kind of approach. I'm not going to go through everything, but I'm probably skipping a lot of issues here. The theme was the social and ethnic diversity, globalization, and minority groups in Japan. Globalization has been taking place everywhere now. And I was just watching a TED Talk recently, and he argues that the globalization, as we talk about it for the last 30 years, the world order in the world has changed quite a bit. And basically, we look at the conflict between US and China, and that how they move product and people around. And so globalization has changed quite a bit. And we do have a very small number of refugees and immigrants. Yeah, the increasing numbers of foreign-born students in Japanese schools and foreign-born workers on the increase. There are times about 15 years ago, there's a huge surge in terms of the number of foreign workers, but it went down because of the COVID, because of the policy changes at the government levels. So multiculturalism, that's an ideal state, is supported only when minorities are identifiable and separable from Japanese nationals by emphasizing cultural differences, physical differences, language differences. But what about those who are not identifiable or visible? What are the hidden or forgotten minority individuals and communities? And that's going to be the focus. Okay. So I tend to define people and minority communities as hidden minority communities, HMCs, in a culturally pluralistic context. It's not necessarily defined as an ethnic, racial, or religious groups with clear markers like skin color, eye color, languages, clothes, but it refers to groups of individuals intentionally set aside or ignored in society due to historical, cultural, and media reasons, value differences, one's distance from daily routines in homes, schools, and neighborhoods, and workplaces. So they're always in the community. They're always in the workplaces our lives. On the surface, we all look the same, but it's value differences. So your experiences to be different. So that's what we'll be focusing on. And that's what we call hidden minority communities, HMCs. And in terms of well-being, we basically look at the life satisfaction or sense of satisfaction. Okay. So given this kind of situations, we need a good social justice perspectives to optimize the understanding of social and a way to achieve well-being for all collectives, all stakeholders in a situation. Like I said, I'm not going to go in detail here, but I look at youth and the parents in the big Korean schools in Japan. And I was lucky because I got the cooperation from the school principals, the school board, to do the research with that school. Just to give you a background, the Korean residents in Japan have been here for 100 years, but they left right after the war. So half of them left the country, and the Japanese government stripped their citizenship. So they're now back to being a Korean resident, a Korean citizen. And there was an interesting book that I wanted to introduce to you. There's a book by Lee. It's called Pachinko. It's a fiction. Like he's half fictional, but tells you the whole story from how they came to Japan before the war and stayed through the war, and then they have their own real life. It's a stories of triumphs, stories of sadness, and so it may be we look at the history of colonization, discrimination, oppression. So how minority communities such as Koreans in Japan. Here's a little background of the Korean communities. There are three major schools. The one is the pro South Korea schools, and the other is pro Pyongyang schools, and the other is the newest development is Korean international schools. So most of the Korean students are in one of those schools. The purpose was to develop a predictive model of well-being for the hidden minority communities such as Korean youth and parents. So that was the main purpose. We skip. And back to the same model that I explained a little bit earlier. Focus on the social connectedness in families, schools, and workplaces and communities. Research question, what are the relative contributing effects of psychosocial life resources on multiple dimensions of well-being among Korean adolescents and parents? And the second question was, what kind of conceptual framework would be appropriate for future intervention programs to promote well-being among Korean youth and parents? Those are the two research questions that I had. And all 7th through 11th graders at the ethnic Korean schools in Tokyo, 470, and their parents. A lot of scales included, and the regression model was run. And here, these are the results. It's kind of hard to see from online, but as collected data from middle school, high schools, they're pretty much because this is an old school, so it's pretty much split between male and the females. Nationality-wise, most of them are Korean residents, but a lot of them are born in Japan. So it's really the Korean minorities. And the number of months in Japan, 144 months in median. Months in the local area, 83. So most of them live where they are now for about 10 years or less. Okay? And many of them have not visited Korea that much. So they're pretty much stationed in Japan. These are regression. I'm trying to predict the different indices of well-being from the 3 sets of predictors. And there are various statistically significant effects. So some findings I wanted to show to you. The step 1 I entered more of the demographic variables. A number of months in Japan tended to lower well-being. This is kind of interesting because you think that if you stay here longer, then you would be happy. You would be more satisfied with life. But it's kind of, when you look at it, the longer you stay in one place, you feel the pressure. You feel the social pressure to conform, to adapt to the situations. So if you look at the middle school and the high school kids, the high school kids are not happy, but as they go up in the grade levels. Now, step 2, this is where I entered the social connectedness variables. The social connectedness to teachers appears more positive for well-being in middle school and high school. So that's when they kind of move from the family to schools, and if they develop a liking for teachers and closeness to teachers, that's a good thing. And step 3 is kind of a disappointing step because some of the SOC subscales showed significant effects only in a few well-being measures among middle school students, but not among high school students. The high school students are not too satisfied with their lives as they go up, and they have to think about probably the glass ceiling effect. Even though you try, you get blocked because you have the minority status kind of blocking you. So currently, most of the intervention programs in secondary schools tend to focus on individually focused issues such as language education, communication skills, and life skills. But we kind of have to shift our focus more toward the social capital variable, like connectedness to teachers, sense of community that reflects social justice issues in society when dealing with the HMCs. Okay? So the other thing was not just because the Korean students or Korean parents show some mental health issues, we need to focus on the whole context, including Japanese residents, Japanese neighbors. And those are the things that I got from the qualitative data. So I did a series of focus groups with Korean mothers, and that's what I was finding. I was skipping all this part there. We tend to focus on like one ethnic group, one minority group, but we're really looking at the context, the whole context where Koreans stay, Japanese live. So that was kind of the conclusions out of this. Social intervention needs to focus on both groups. The Koreans minorities are the major immigrant group in Japan. I'm gonna skip this part here. So we're getting back to this model again, the life resources model that tend to focus more on social connectedness and how that impacts our sense of well-being. So conclusions, I made 4 conclusions, very quick. Embrace social justice values in designing research at the individual and collective levels. 2 is innovative and rigorous mixed method research in designing and analyzing stuff. And collaborative participatory research with marginalized hidden minority communities And finally, we need a good research training for graduate students and professionals to address social justice issues. Okay, so 5 minutes before 10 o'clock, and here's if you are and coming to Tokyo, and I think there are some people won't get in touch with us, and we're happy to accommodate you. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Toshi, for such a interesting presentation. And I think it is also thought-provoking because it is, one of the section about the hidden minority communities. I think in some places like Indonesia, we have that kind of community. They are minority and they are hidden. So I'd like to invite the audience online or offline. If you have any questions, any comment, anything, any observation, please. Okay. Is there anyone from? Yeah, great to see you too. Maybe first I'd like to give for the online audience, online participants, if you have any. Nothing? Not yet? Offline participants? Okay, please.
Okay. Good morning, Prof. My name is Erlin. I'm a master student in human resource, but I'm interested in social psychology also. What it was a new topic for me, but very interesting about justice. I think that one word justice is the one that make me want to come here this morning. Well, I have two questions, maybe very basic, but please inform me. Number one, when we talk about something like connectedness and sense, how can we intervene? How can we evaluate? I mean, like connectedness and sense is quite abstract for me. Yeah.
Connectedness
and sense. How can we evaluate or
measure?
Yeah, measure, and moreover, how can we make intervention for that? And then number two, when we talk about minority, what I mean in Indonesia, most of the minority, because of their difficult situation, are quite close. It is not easy to get a data from them. They kind of have maybe some, what is it? They're quite close. So how can we solve that problem while we want to get a real and then good data from them? That's the question. Thank you.
Yeah, those are good questions. For social connectedness, I've developed this scale several years ago, and all items are not that great. So I'm kind of still working on it. It's a measure. And also, we look at that, evaluate that from qualitative interviews with the people. So not necessarily quantitative measures. And in terms of collecting data in Indonesia, I don't have any experience working in Indonesia or different groups, but what you have to enlighten me. How would you collect data in Indonesia? Do you have the subject pool or something in the psychology faculty? How do you collect data?
I mean, for example, if you collect data from refugees, because of their hard experience, some of them like quite close. They don't want to tell us the real story because they're afraid that afraid of authority, afraid. Well, actually, maybe we can try to to build a good relationship with them, but maybe you have some experience or maybe more specific and more academic way to do that relation.
Yeah, in my life, in my work life, I tried all kinds of stuff to collect data. With the data monger, we just wanted to get the data to publish or something. But I did all kinds of stuff, and I did some data collection in the communities. I bought them some noodles. I bought them pizza coupons or movie tickets for the high school students, and sometimes we did was like with the immigrant groups. We teach your kids English, so I lined up several students and they will teach, and so it's really you have to be creative in collecting. Also, I collected data from Korean churches. The Korean churches used to be pretty big, like 4,000 members. And so once you get the approval from the minister, that is so easy. One time I was collecting data in China, like a few thousand data points, because the teacher or the school principal tell them, you fill out this. There's no sense of justice. You kind of force them to do it. But I don't do that anymore. A lot of there's interviews, and if there's a chance collecting data in schools, the last time I did the big school data was a few years ago. I bought a big box of cookies and take it to the chair of the board of directors, and I wanted to explain what it is. So they collect the data for us. So it's been always an issue, I think, for those of us who are in political science, collect the data. Years ago, I used to do a telephone survey. So I set up the phone survey lab at my university and used the student volunteers every night for 3 weeks, give them call. But it's really was a challenge for those who collect the data and for those who are being reached out. So, yeah, that was a good. Yeah.
Okay, I think there is one questions in the chat box. Can you scroll up a little bit, please? Or Paramita, you can just open your microphone and directly, yeah.
Yeah, good morning, Pak Dicky and Prof. Sasao. Thank you for the opportunity. I was wonder about the longer foreigners stay, the less well-being they have due to the hate speech or etc. that just explained before. My questions are, it's also common to local people that logically live there for a long time. And if it is particularly happen just for foreigners, is there any argument or basic psychological explanation about longer relationship between local and foreigners produce lessen foreigners' well-being? Thank you.
The longer you stay, the less happy you are. And I think it's more, I don't know any one particular theory, but I think it has a lot to do with how you experience your job situations, work-life situations. If you work at a particular place for a long time and you're good, you're qualified, and yet there's just a glass ceiling that you just can't get over. Just not because you are foreigner, because you're different, but yeah, back on stage. That I don't. Okay, so yeah, on screen. Okay. So I think that's the longer you stay or the longer you're in the particular environment, you feel less happy. Because you come to the realization sometimes that you don't feel that you're part of the community or culture. So that's probably the theoretical explanation is, I don't know how to put it in the theory, but that's how we kind of perceive when we're talking with the people. As long in the first few years, you're happy, you're working hard, you're getting more money, you're trying to acclimatize to the situation. But the longer you're here, you're not going to be happy because of the realization that there's just a glass ceiling effect. And it also has a lot to do with personality variables.
How about if you have any further or follow-up questions?
Yeah, Pak Dicky, I'm sorry I cannot open my video. Uh, yeah, it's quite acceptable because coming to reality is not fully like enjoying for some time vacation, I think. So I was wondering if there is a particular pattern that we can know more on why it's happened for foreigner. But if it's uh, because of the coming to reality, I think it's quite logical. Thank you, Pak Diki, and thank you, Professor Sasao.
Okay.
Any other comment or questions? Okay. Is there any?
For me, it's enough. Thank you.
Any other? Just raise your hand and open your mic. If not, then I have one question for you. So you mentioned your model is life resource model, and then it was applied in the context of hidden hidden minority communities. Did you find, or do you find any different pattern in terms of life resource between minority versus majority, if there's any?
I haven't compared any group. I applied to the Korean community only at this point. So there's no comparative data to look at this model. So let's see, yeah.
Okay. Maybe our friends who join from Japan, if you would like to have any comment or questions to Toshi, you don't have to wait until Toshi come back to Japan to ask your questions. Yes, please.
Can I ask you a question? Actually, it's not to Toshi, but Toshi talked about the hidden community, hidden minority community, about that. Then I would like to know what kind of hidden minority community do you have in Indonesia? So I would like to know more about that. So could you tell us, anyone? Yeah.
So that question is directed to me or to any Indonesian participants who joined this?
Maybe Dicky, actually.
Okay, thank you, Aomi, for your questions. Yeah, we do have a lot of minority communities, and some of them are hidden. It could be based on religion, based on, I think just like in other places, sexual orientations, and also based on ethnicities, based on lifestyle. Maybe I'd like to give you some concrete examples, like in East Java, there is a community, but they're not really hidden, but they're minority. They are practicing their own way of life because they have their own beliefs and values. They have their own cultural practices that are not applied by the majority. So, for example, one of the distinctive characteristics of this particular community is their belief. Like, we would say we have the deism, that we believe in God as a for the majority of Indonesians, but they rather like their beliefs is to something uh, with the supreme power, but it is not, as God that we believe it by the majority of Indonesian. So that's one of the examples, the minority groups. So it of course the main characteristic is their size, the number of the populate the members. Yeah, actually we do have uh, that kind of minorities. Yeah, also hidden
Yes.
because like maybe they are practicing something sacred and secret. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Maybe it's like indigenous group.
Yeah,
Um,
indigenous group. Yeah, like indigenous group.
mhm. Like, yeah, it's really interesting. Like in Japan, there is indigenous group like called Ainu or Ryukyu, but it's really hidden and it's not really discussed in the psychology or community psychology in Japan. So maybe the studies about indigenous group might be accumulated in the Southeast Asian countries. So this is really interesting topic.
Yeah.
I think when way back 400 years ago in Japan, there was a ban on Christianity in Japan. So they developed what they call the hidden Christian movement. So on the surface, on surface, they set up altars, they set up this, so they be like a Buddhist altar, but behind it there is this Christian crucifix in the behind, and that carried the tradition for a few hundred years, and they're finally finding out about this particular sect, and I went to the museum, but it's incredible place, and everyone looks like Buddhist families and everything. But now it's really, if you look at the Bible is slightly different from the traditional Christian Bible. So those what they call the hidden Christian movement. And but I think they have a hard time. It's a small community in Kyushu area, but it's interesting.
Yeah, to relate on what you just said, Toshi, that Indonesia is known as the biggest Muslim country in the world. But actually, within Islam population in Indonesia, there are some, like as you said, sects, and yeah, there are smaller groups of this kind of, community in Indonesia. So they are minority, and sometimes they don't really open, their practices. So yeah, people just see them as a minority. Thank you, Aomi, for your questions.
Thank you.
Any online participants? Any comment? Any questions? Okay, if no, then we can wrap this up. It's an hour.
Yeah.
Slightly more than an hour. So thank you first of all, Toshi, again for sharing with us your thought, your experiences, and your studies in Japan. And I think we learned what you call as a life resource model and how it relates to the issue of social justice as well as well-being. And thank you for all the participants who join us offline here and also online. We hope to see you again in our next research talk or research day. And that's it from me. Thank you and see you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you.